Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, January 31st. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you, taking a little break from our position preview series to catch up on some late January news. We have some signings, some small trades, a few shakeups in bullpen situations, which is great because we have not had our 2025 reliever preview yet. We're waiting pretty much on Kenley Jansen at this point before recording that episode. We can't wait much longer. It'll be early next week either way. But if I could wish for one thing this weekend as far as baseball transactions go, I think it's Kenley Jansen signing somewhere, just so we can have a little more clarity about the bullpens around the league. Join our Discord. Within the Discord, you can find all sorts of good things, including our Hive Mind rankings. You can catch up on those this weekend. Submit your position rankings for all the positions we've covered so far. We're going to compile those and put together some listener rankings. We'll share those here in a couple of weeks. We got a lot of responses so far. Looking forward to getting a few more of those. The other benefit of joining the Discord is great memes. This is a beauty from Captain Jason Solo. There is for those of you who are not watching on YouTube or in the Discord, getting heckled by listeners. We got Curly Guy, Lars Nootbaar's health grade, and interrupting me as three almost demons sort of bullying Eno. And then there's me in the next frame reaching out, DVR's Midwest kindness. And then the third frame is it's on the rundown as I give a back to belly suplex and crush him. So sorry, I didn't mean to crush you after everybody else was crushing you previously. That was not my intent.
It's no problem.
One other bit of housekeeping elsewhere on the Athletic Podcast Network. Chantel Jennings brings you the story of a Notre Dame freshman forward, Kate Koval, who grew up in Ukraine, moved to the U.S. at age 15 to pursue her basketball dreams. Less than a year later, Kate's world was upended again when her home country was invaded by Russia, tearing her family apart in ways she could never have imagined, and forcing Kate and all those around her to reconsider the true meaning of sacrifice. Check it out on the Athletic Women's Basketball Show. All right. On to the rest of the rundown. Max Scherzer has a new home. The final chapter, perhaps, of Max Scherzer's big league career will be played out in Toronto, at least to start the year. It's a one-year deal. Makes sense at this stage of his career. $15.5 million, no deferrals. Yep, that also checks out. This is a situation very similar to Justin Verlander, though, where they're at the point in their career where it's year to year. It's teams that are probably hopeful of making the playoffs, even if they're not necessarily projected for it. The Jays have been aggressive over the course of this offseason. As far as what it does to their depth chart, it should bump Yariel Rodriguez into the swingman role, probably sends Jake Bloss down to AAA to begin the season. But the key question here, what's left in the tank for Max Scherzer? I mean, a lot of injuries have started to pile up on him at this stage as well, so that complicates things a little bit. But is there a quality back-end starter here for the Jays?
Guess who has a better fastball stuff plus between Scherzer and Verlander?
It's probably Scherzer now.
New stuff plus.
Yeah, okay. So it's probably Scherzer now.
Yeah. Because the old one said it was Verlander, but it was weird because Verlander's fastball was being hit very hard, And we had the whole solution for Verlander to kind of toggle his usage of the four seam and throw it to different places. Whereas I don't think Scherzer's had that problem. In fact, you can just look at some of the surface level results, and Scherzer's been a little better recently. The problem has been the back. And so, I guess health wise, I might give it to Verlander, although he had his issues outside of his more recent Tommy John. Peripherals I'll give to Verlander, like, sort of park factor peripherals. Like, I'd like his divisional setup better, although he'll have to face the Dodgers. But I think Scherzer will consistently have tougher opponents and tougher parks. But stuff-wise, I like Scherzer. And so I think when you are picking these guys where you're picking them, you're not picking them for 180 innings, and so you might as well take Scherzer over Verlander.
All right, so you have a clear preference between the two. That's pretty interesting, but good reasoning behind it. And I think the park makes it closer for me. Like, San Francisco gives me a lot of confidence. You're right about having to face the Dodgers, and Arizona, as we learned last year, also just a tough lineup to deal with too. So the in-division matchups do sort of bring the park the park boost down a little bit, given where we're at right now. I look at Scherzer and I'm almost more worried about him physically. 43 in the third innings last year is just a dreadful workload, and the back is a huge problem at this point. So I think if I'm choosing, I might be more inclined to go the other way and take Verlander. They're still very similar in price. I don't think that's going to change now that Scherzer has a team either. I guess knowing that you prefer Scherzer, are you actually doing that, or are you going to the other pitchers in this range? Because these are guys we have not talked about in a preview yet. They're the late pitchers that go basically in episode 4 of our 3-part series. Yeah, check the math on that one. But that includes guys like Hayden Birdsong, Grant Holmes, Ryan Weathers, Kyle Harrison, Luis Ortiz, if you prefer more like crusty veteran types, Eduardo Rodriguez, Aaron Savali go in that group, and then Edward Cabrera also is in there. It's a dart at that point, right? It's one of your last pitchers on your roster. So
I have the weird thing about these guys, though. I will take them at their ADP, but I bet you they have pretty wide ranges. Do you have that in front of you, like sort of max and min? Because I'm in this draft right now where Scherzer got taken after the news in the 19th round, and he got taken. Let's see if that's going that way. He got taken ahead of Barrios, Olson, Verlander, Keller, Cutter Crawford, Clay Holmes, Walker Buehler, Nestor Cortez, Jackson Jobe, Luis Severino, Brian Bayo. Like, I would take a fair amount of those guys, I think. I'm not looking at my rankings when I say this, and I should, but let me see where I have Scherzer. Yeah, I would take a fair amount of those guys because I have Scherzer and Verlander like 92, 93, but I have Nestor Cortez in the 80s. I have Ortiz in the 80s. I have Brian Bayo in the short 80s. So like Reese Olson, I have it at 71. So Reese Olson went after Max Scherzer, and I have him 20 picks higher. Okay. Doesn't that seem right though? Because Reese Olson's like pretty good in a good park and younger.
Yeah, I mean, health is the main question for Olson
too, I guess.
But 112 and a third last year,
more than Scherzer,
more than Scherzer.
More than Verlander?
Where's the strikeout rate going for Reese Olson?
I don't know, dude. But he goes in a group of players where if I know exactly how to use you, Verlander's close. I mean, I feel like you could be like, just use him at home, and you probably get a pretty good pitcher out of it.
Yeah, and then occasionally you may have to use him for some road starts because of injuries and other things happening to your roster, but I think you'll be all right if it happens like that. So we're split as far as our preferences between Scherzer and Verlander. I do think you'll see widespread. So far, last 14 days, Justin Verlander, min pick 258, max pick 644. I mean, that's kind of silly. 261 to 508 on Scherzer.
Maybe some group decided that he wasn't going to sign, or maybe he was done.
Yeah, so I do think you'll see those min picks probably creep up for both of those guys, given their reputations.
But and that 250 is not too far from where he just went in my draft, right?
Yeah, it's not that far. The name that came up in that list of alternatives that deserves a quick look is Grant Holmes, and I'm worried we're not going to get to every single pitcher in the pool anyway. So I feel like it's okay to break the mold a little bit and bring Grant Holmes into this random conversation.
Let's talk about him.
So the reason why I think Grant Holmes deserves a second look is because Atlanta's been really quiet in terms of upgrading and changing the roster this offseason, right? They made the Profar signing. We talked about that during the outfield preview. That kind of fills an area of need, but they're relying on the return to health from Strider. So it's Sale Strider at the top. Ronaldo Lopez, we talked about, dealt with some arm injuries in the second half last year. He's the number 3 right now. We love Spencer Schwellenbach, so he's really the 3. And Grant Holmes would be probably the favorite to be the number 5 starter as things sit today.
Fangraphs has Ian Anderson in there, and I'd take Holmes over Anderson.
Grant Holmes was really good last year. I mean, a 24.8% K rate, 5.3% walk rate. I know it wasn't exclusively as a starter, right? It was 26 appearances, 7 starts, but they changed him. We talked about the mix being a lot different for Grant Holmes once he left Oakland. Is this a late breakout? Is this actually a guy that goes extremely late that has a better path to a starting spot than some of the guys ahead of him who are clearly already 6th or 7th on their depth chart and actually showed intriguing skills a year ago?
Yeah, I think The only risk is that maybe there's an incomplete on their offseason regimen in Atlanta, because they do have $10-11 million under the first apron. So they could spend that money. Like, I don't think they'd get Nick Pivetta for $10 million. And honestly, actually, I don't even know if they would get a starting pitcher for 10. You know what I mean? Like,
Scherzer got 15.5. Like 15 seems to be the going rate for a lot of guys that you would actually slot into a fourth or fifth rotation spot.
Yeah, the changes that Holmes made were to throw a slider that's now his best pitch, that he hadn't really thrown before. And he's got slider, curve, which are good, and then sort of cutter fastball, which are mediocre-ish, but not in like such a bad level. Like in terms of velo, like he's in 94 plus. So, he kind of took that reliever mentality to starting, where he was like, I relieved a little bit, and then when I started again, I realized I could just try to throw that hard for the 5 innings they give me. Kind of a modern approach to pitching, but it works because he just throws with great command 2 breaking balls and like mixes in the fastballs when he needs to keep him honest. Oopsie has him at 3.88, much better than the other projections, and I tend to believe that one. And, given our conversations just now about like who's out there for $10 million that could even supplant him. And I'm going to the free agent tracker right now for unsigned pitchers. And I've got Jack Flaherty. He's not signed for 10.
Nope.
Andrew Haney. He's got a projection of 2 at 12.5 a year. What if that went down? But Haney's like one of those guys that's, even in his last gig was in between the rotation and the bullpen. Like, he could just be a depth piece if they sign him, Patrick Corbin. Kyle Gibson has a 1 in 10. Would Kyle Gibson supplant Grant Holmes?
I feel like Holmes is a reason why you wouldn't spend $10 million on Kyle Gibson.
Yeah. Does he have options? He wanted to use Holmes.
He should now. Holmes does not have options.
Because he's been around for so long.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's like 28. So, no.
So, yeah, he's going to be on the roster. In worst case scenario, he's like the on the roster 6th starter, which we've realized now is like a 110 inning gig.
Yeah, especially if you have low health grades on multiple starters ahead of them, and that's definitely the case, I think, with the way this rotation is built right now. Anyway, just thought Holmes was sort of a name that gets less attention than a lot of the others that were in that group of alternatives, kind of in between the likes of Scherzer and Verlander, ADP-wise right now. As I mentioned up top, we have movement in the reliever market. The Royals getting on the board again. Carlos Estévez goes there on a 2-year deal. It can become a 3-year deal worth a total of $33 million. I don't know if we have clarity yet from anyone in the Royals front office indicating that they will use Estévez as the closer over Lucas Erceg, but that is definitely the concern, given that Estévez has experience in that role, a little bit more experience in that role than Erceg, who looks really good and by all accounts is a fantastic high leverage reliever. So what is the situation here as far as how you want to approach uncertainty? Weekend drafts. If you're thinking about investing anything in this Kansas City bullpen in hopes of getting the person that leads this team in saves, what is your approach?
I'm going to go with that guy with better stuff. Lucas Erceg has a 10-point advantage in New Stuff Plus over Carlos Estévez, and I think that matters. But I did want to sort of reinvestigate my priors, as always. Reinvestigate yourself is maybe a motto of mine. And in this case, I went and looked, and I did the R-squared between in-season stuff, fastball stuff, strikeout rate, walk rate, and saves. So that's not predicting next year's saves. It's sort of being descriptive of this year's. And I don't know if you've got the board for that.
I didn't make the board because it's pretty ugly.
Yeah, it's just like numbers. But what I found was that, stick with me here. This is my analogy. So if you want to describe ERA this year, you can look at strikeouts, walks, and strikeout minus walks, right? We know that strikeout minus walks is like very strong. overall stuff plus for a player is more predictive of saves than walk rate is of ERA. And it's just slightly worse predictive than strikeout rate is of ERA, but it's not as strong as K minus BB. So stuff plus is not the K minus BB of saves, which I was kind of hoping it would be. And I also tested fastball stuff plus, and that was weaker than overall stuff plus. So maybe, maybe it doesn't matter that Urseg throws harder and has more stuff, but I also want to put this to the readers. We've talked about this idea that maybe some teams have a fireman and have maybe use their best reliever in the 7th and 8th to hit the lineup where they need it and then finish with just a cromulent closer, And I want to put forth to you, I looked through the bullpens last year and I'm not sure if anyone did it. If someone did it, I think it was the Phillies with Jeff Hoffman floating around behind Carlos Estévez. I think Hoffman might have been better. I couldn't find anywhere else. Hector Neris was saving and Porter Hodge wasn't, but guess how it ended?
Yeah. There is a progression that can happen sometimes with these teams that go with the guy that has slightly lesser stuff. I mean, Carlos Estévez is not bad.
He might be the closer to start the year, right? A little bit like a Neris, but I don't know if he's going to be the closer to end the year. So I would say it just devalues both of them. But if you want to hold one in a dynasty or something, it's definitely Urseg.
Yeah, and the Urseg situation, just as far as ADP goes, he's going to dip, I would assume. It'd be weird if he didn't. His ADP last 14 days, basically with no news like this factored in, pick 123.
Yeah, that's going down.
That's definitely going to go down. It's just behind Ryan Walker. It was just ahead of Kirby Yates, who's also going to fall after landing with the Dodgers. We'll get to their bullpen in just a few minutes. Alexis Díaz. I assume Urseg
who's going
to
who's going to rise up to meet Urseg is Justin Martinez.
Yeah,
Arizona, because until Jansen signs, because Arizona could totally sign Jansen. There's a lot of different situations right now that could sign Jansen and mess things up, but just like Estévez messed things up. But I might take Justin Martinez over Lucas Urseg right now because he has the job. That's what screws up any numbers you try to use to predict saves, is that the most powerful thing is who pitched the 8th, who has the opportunity. You know what I mean? That's the most powerful thing, is role. That's the most powerful predictor. And that's really hard in the offseason because we're just what does the manager say? And the manager's going to lie to you. Oh, I like both these guys. Both these guys are going to get chances. We have every man on deck kind of a philosophy here.
And it's one of those things where what is said about the role and what is done, it's a little bit like soft using a 6-man rotation. Where the Dodgers don't come out and call it out, but they do it. And some teams will use a committee and kind of suggest that they are not going to use one. Some teams will say the opposite. It's just decoding those lies is part of the job, but I feel like it's still very hard to do it, even with a lot of experience.
Just to let people behind the curtain a little bit, I actually think that the media has a role in a weird way in declaring closers and stuff, because what happens is before the game and after the game, one of the most often asked questions from the media to the manager is, who's your closer? What's going on at closer? Is he going to have opportunities to close this game? You know what I mean? And if your closer starts blowing it, how long are you going to stay with him? Literally, that's one of the other most often asked question is, how's blah blah blah's ankle or knee or elbow? It's one of the most boring things that's done every day. And managers have to do it with a smile on their face and, make friends among media. And the ones like Roberts and people like that, they're really great at it, But it is one of the dumbest things. So I do think that puts pressure on. And then the last thing is, Sky Kalkman pointed this out, and he's on the Discord, and you'll see him on Blue Sky and stuff. In fact, if you look, the highest leverage opportunities are in the 9th. So you can shoot yourself in the foot by being like, no, we're holding Jeff Hoffman, for the biggest opportunity when it actually might be the 9th. You might use Jeff Hoffman in the 7th, and then, oh, crap. Now it's a 1-run game in the 9th. So the biggest leverage opportunities end up being the 9th. There is a reason we have closers. And it does take something just beyond stuff. So I won't be like, totally by the numbers. It's just stuff, I know from the numbers it's not just stuff. But that is how I hew. I think the guy with the best stuff in the bullpen is going to be the closer. That's how I work.
That is a reasonable foundation to live your life in fantasy baseball. I think it's good to have some basic rules in place. I think in the case of the Royals, if Erceg falls and Estévez is still cheaper in drafts or they're similar in price, I actually think the other factor beyond the stuff is money. I've always thought the contracts, the amount of money that you're giving someone,
and that is something that
will shape the plan a little bit.
Well, it's like it shapes how you're thought of in the clubhouse.
Right. It's this extra factor that it might vary from club to club, but I think it always has some weight. And just previous work in the role. I mean, Carlos Estévez has 57 saves over the last 2 seasons, pitching for I think 3 different teams.
Erceg has saves too,
or 2 different teams. Yeah, Erceg's got some too, but I think I'm taking the cheaper of the 2 if I'm getting into this situation at all, and it might be one to avoid.
You're taking the cheaper of the 2.
Whoever's cheaper.
Oh, you mean draft costs?
The draft day cost,
not money cost.
Because I don't think they add Carlos Estévez at $11 million a year if they don't have some intention of keeping him in high leverage, and then it could toggle and. You're like, look, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it could be cheap enough too where it's a cut if I'm wrong. So my guess is they get close on ADP. I end up with the cheaper one. If I end up with one at all, the goal would be
we
to
can rinse and
situation.
repeat for the next item almost. Is it the next item? I'm not looking at the rundown right now, but we have another item that's very close to the same conversation. We might want to just jump to it because it's almost the same idea.
So a point of clarity, Eno does read the rundown and
I even made the rundown this time.
He made this one. Yeah, he did me a favor and did 95% of the work making this one. And I started and molded it a little bit more to make sure I was comfortable with it. We're good to go. So I appreciate that.
Just ignored me.
What really happens in Eno's world, I know this is the truth. No peek behind the curtain.
Oh no, another peek. We've done enough peek behind the curtain.
We're already behind the curtain.
I'm already uncomfortable. I don't like this. Where's this going?
Eno will set the record one day for most tabs opened on a computer at the company. And I know if our tech team can count tabs remotely, they could verify this, that I would wager there's no person at The Athletic who has more tabs open on their computer at any given time than Eno. So
I have
the rundown,
3 browsers open with all the requisite tabs. 3 browsers, 3 windows per browser, and probably about 35 tabs per window.
Yeah, your browser tab situation, it's like being addicted to poker and playing like 15 tables at a time. That's what you're doing with tabs. And it's, I've got Justin Martinez's Fangraphs page open in 3 different browsers at the same time. That's how you lose track of the rundown. It's not because you don't care about it. It's because
I have no idea where it is in all these tabs. And I have to close a lot of the browsers to do this show because having so many tabs open is just a drain on all the resources.
Yeah, the recording gets choppy. The video starts to glitch out because of so that's what's really happening if you want to understand how the sausage is made here.
I have to fly blind and I put myself in your hands.
And we're still here, so I must be okay at just making sure we get the information out there. Let's go to the Cubs situation, though. They make a trade with the Astros.
That is the one I was talking about.
Yeah, you built it, so you had a good feel for it. I didn't completely jumble it. I just highlighted some stuff. Ryan Presley's a Cub now. I assume Ryan Presley's the closer now because that's a bullpen where there are younger guys that have good stuff. You've talked about your appreciation for Nate Pearson and some of the ways the Cubs might use him.
He has the best stuff of the 3 of him, Porter, Hodge, and Presley. Yeah.
Hodge was sort of the guy that had it at the end of the year that looked like in keeper and dynasty leagues he picked him up. Maybe that would be your source.
Some whispers that the Cubs are going to stretch him out to a point, and this being Pearson.
Right. So that would give you clarity that it's Presley versus Hodge maybe, and Pearson's more of a, hey, you're going to be the fireman that gets us 4, 5, 6 outs at a time. You're going to be a 6th, 7th, 8th inning guy wherever we need you, and then whatever chairs we have after that or how it goes. And I wonder too, thinking about Craig Counsell as a manager, how he handled things in Milwaukee, having a capital C closer most of the time that he was there. Like that's probably how
with
he
like
wants
a
to
young
manage that
guy
bullpen.
behind him that was actually pretty fire. Like that was
Yeah.
kind of the Council's thing was like, we've got
Just
the
having a lot of
established
options,
guy
yeah.
and we have Trevor McGill behind him, like we always have the other guy that's like coming up.
Yeah. Yeah. You had Williams when you had Hader, and it's just the way you're built. You got your depth. It's good. I think Pressly begins the year with the job, but same kind of question. Does he finish the year with the job? And we've seen erosions to his stuff. Not a surprise. He's 36 years old, but he's still pretty good. He's coming off of a down year, basically the worst year he's had since the shortened season in 2020, worst full season he's had since his final full year with the Twins all the way back in 2017. Which version of Ryan Pressly are we getting with his move to the Cubs?
Yeah, this is why I looked up fastball stuff plus versus overall stuff plus, because Ryan Pressly's fastball has been going down. And, he has a 91 stuff plus on his fastball right now. And I think that I thought, oh, okay, so the case I'm making here is that Hodge's fastball is better, and that's going to be more predictive of saves. It turned out that overall stuff plus was more predictive than fastball stuff plus. So I was wrong on that one. I still think eventually you kind of go to the closer's fastball. So you know what? I like your analysis on the last one. I kind of will I think Hodge will plummet behind Pressly, and I think it makes me a little bit more likely to take Hodge. Pressly would have to be low, I think, for me to take him. I am in a 20-team dynasty where now I'm going to keep him because I do think he'll start the season as a closer. But, I don't know. I think Hodge might eventually take it, but it may be in August.
I actually think there's a better chance if Carlos Estévez is used as the regular closer for the Royals to start the year, and Pressly's the regular closer for the Cubs to start the year. I think there's a better chance Estévez keeps it all year of the two. Even though I think Porter Hodge is good.
He does have a better fastball. I mean, I do think that it does matter, and I'm working more off an anecdote here than what my number says, but I do think that what happens with the closer's fastball is you can still throw it in the zone and be dominant, right? And what happens if you don't have the closer's fastball is you kind of end up, throwing a bunch of junk, which is not really what your manager, I think, wants to see out of his closer, because that can lead to walks and really long innings where you're just like, oh my God, can you get this guy out? Like, think about all the guys who've had a closer's fastball with a capital C and a capital F. A lot of those guys have had the longevity in the role. Like those are the kind of Hall of Famers. Moe's cutter. Billy Wagner's fastball, that sort of deal.
Yeah. So I think there's a path for Pressly to keep this job for a little while, even though Porter Hodge is probably still your keeper dynasty stash if you can afford to hold a reliever that's not closing in your league. That's probably the current assessment of how things sit for the Cubs.
And we'll talk about a little bit more when we do the closers episode, a little bit more about how these guys maybe rank in ordinal fashion, in terms of like, where would you end up taking Pressly and where would you end up taking Estévez? Because I think we both agree you take Pressly and Estévez, like if all things being equal, you take Pressly and Estévez first, but there may be a case to be made to take Urseg and Hodge much later and avoid, getting in trouble with a mediocre veteran closer. There's a lot of this like Kenley Jansen that happens, right? Where he has the role to begin the season, and by August, everyone's like, "Is he still the closer?"
And usually he still is.
Yeah, Kimbrel does.
Kimbrel's a little worse, I think, as far as that second half wobble actually costing him save chances.
April, he's the closer. July, he's like, what?
One more bullpen to look at here for a moment. The Dodgers officially have added Kirby Yates. I think the last time we spoke about it, it was in the close to an agreement phase, or like Bob Nightingale had it, but there were no other confirmations of it. But now it's actually official. This is like a week later. It's a 1-year, $13 million deal. What are the Dodgers going to do? I mean, in the words of Brandon Gomes, he was asked about Tanner Scott, This is from a Fabian Ardaya piece on The Athletic. Brandon Gomes said, I think Tanner is going to get a ton of opportunities to close games, but the biggest thing is how it fits together to handle the back end. I think the main focus will be how best do we put that bullpen together down the stretch for Doc to figure out how he's going to deploy guys. So in this instance, right, there's a little bit of situational, how do we handle it, like based on who we're facing.
Down the stretch, as if we may just have a closer that we just sort of like putts through the season with, so that more people see him, and he's like in more situations against the 3, 4, 5s and whatever, and we're going to win anyway, and whatever, but then by playoff time, maybe a totally different bullpen. And that is what we saw this year. Yeah,
that's a little strange, but what matters to you in the regular season might not be the exact same list of things that matters in the playoffs.
The more people see you, the worse you are against them.
Right.
So it could be just sort of managing, like, we don't want the Padres to see, our September closer, every time.
They're going to say, the Padres in division, Kirby Yates is going to get the saves.
Yeah, right. Until September. Then it's going to be like, oh, damn. Now here's Tanner Scott.
Against teams they don't expect to see in the playoffs, Tanner Scott's going to get all the saves.
Maybe. I don't know. It's an idea. I would love to see that tracked. I mean, what we have seen is a real upheaval in September and October in terms of bullpen usage. I mean, it almost doesn't matter who your closer's been all year, but when it gets to October, sometimes it's your third starting pitcher. It's just like, I think it's very stuff oriented, where it's like, who has the best stuff in the last 2 weeks? It may not be our flagging 36-year-old may go to Cooperstown closer anymore.
That's true. And I think that's important. I mean, I think when I look at the Dodgers right now, apparently the injury concerns that Kopech had at the end of last season are a non-factor right now. So that's good news.
I think he'd be my closer if I ran things, just because I'd be like, right-hander with that fastball, just do it. If I was just setting it up, because then I'd be like, Scott can come in for the big lefties. Yates and Scott is like a great tandem, and Evan Phillips in the 7th to get all your righties out. I don't know. It's a pretty good bullpen. Nobody has options though, so there's no optioning around. They have to be really careful about how much they use people. I think they'll be using the IL instead of options.
I loved Kopech where he was going before they added Scott. I kind of think Scott's going to end up leading the team in saves now. I'm
with like 18
to 22, but great ratios. Yeah. And it's fine. He's being treated as a clear closer too. The earliest he's been drafted, just looking at the last 5 days of ADPs, pick 160. And they're going to generate plenty of save chances. So I think that's a bargain. I don't know where the ADP is really going to end up once we get closer to March, but those comments from Brandon Gomes to me are a pretty good signal that if we're splitting even 3 people,
Scott's the
shares,
guy you mentioned. Yeah,
Scott's the guy that's getting the largest share of that pie, I think, based on what we're hearing.
He's getting the smallest. I mean, it's just, when we're talking about closer's fastball, like, it's not his.
No, I'm telling you, man, Kirby Yates is getting all the saves against the Padres. Like, that's going to be their move. But I do like Tanner Scott where he's going right now. I think he's the way to get the best share of the Dodgers bullpen that you can get, at least as things sit here on the last day of January. How about this? We got a movement on the position player side. A couple of them. The Rays have signed Ha-Seong Kim. It is a 2-year deal. There is an opt-out. $13 million this year. Could be $16 million next year. This seems like an easy layup decision for Kim to opt out. If he's healthy for most of this season, he's young enough, good enough defensive shortstop where 3 or 4 year deal seems like a guarantee for him. The big question is, like, what is he going to be like at the plate coming off of shoulder surgery? And the related big question is, how far behind is he actually going to be? Because you hear different things depending on who's talking.
I think the market tells us, I think the deal tells us something, like the number of dollars he was given by the Rays tells us something, because this is not an expensive deal. And, we just talked about how the Braves might have $10 million. Could they have figured out a way to structure this where it's $10 million and some deferred, or whatever? You know what I mean? I mean, they have Orlando Arcia, like, they could do better than that. Right now, they're 27th in the depth charts at shortstop, and they're the Braves. You got the Tigers trying to get better. They're 26th. You got the Brewers 25th with Joey Ortiz there, which leaves third open. So you could have signed Kim and put him there and pushed Joey Ortiz back to third, Other possible options. The Guardians with Rocchio at 21. I know they don't spend, but this is not spending hard, and so even the Padres with moving Xander Bogaerts over. So none of those teams that could have used him and probably have $10 million. I don't know if the Padres do. I don't know if the Braves do. But there's one of those teams has $10, $15 million they could have spent. They all passed on Kim. So I think people are legitimately worried about the shoulder.
Yeah, it was a labrum repair on the throwing shoulder for a shortstop. So, yeah, you will have questions about the arm strength and when you can comfortably play him there again. And then, it's the back shoulder for him as a hitter. So maybe that's a little less of a concern on the hitting side overall.
But he wasn't really a power hitter anyway. But supposedly by Jeff Zimmerman's numbers, you want to subtract 20 points of OPS from somebody who missed more than 30 days with a shoulder problem.
That puts him in the old 680 range if you do that from last season.
I did look at him like next to other players at the 680 level, and it's better than Caballero and Walls.
Yeah,
that's why they did this deal.
Yeah, as far as the Rays go, I mean, okay, this is a good fit. They needed a shortstop, a guy that can be at least an average big league bat, even coming off the injury. That'd be a step forward compared to Caballero. Caballero looks like a clear bench option. Walls has been so banged up. I think he's a bench player too. I know at one point there were some prospect analysts out there that saw him as at least a
defense
second division regular, like a good enough shortstop. Such a good defensive player that you'd accept a 85 or 90 WRC plus or something.
But the Rays didn't feel that way because they went and traded for Caballero and played him over Walls,
And Walls was hurt last year too. But so far for his career, Taylor Walls has a 71 WRC plus in the big leagues. Yeah, and that's in 1,200 plate appearances. So, one of Walls or Caballero is going to get optioned down, assuming everyone's healthy.
Well, maybe not. Have options. They start with Caballero and Walls and Kim on the IL.
Well, right.
So then one of them get option when Kim comes back.
Good point of clarity. Once Kim's ready, one of Walls or Caballero is off the roster. They can be optioned. You don't have to DFA them. But as far as how your bench would go at that time, it's one of those guys. Until Kim's back, both are on the roster. Your backup catcher is your second bench spot. Richie Palacios can play all over. I think he's your third bench spot. And then, as we talked about on the UT preview, Eloy Jimenez, if he makes the roster, he's there as a platoon partner for Jonathan Aranda, who also still has options left.
So what you may find is that there's somebody without that actually helps Eloy because he doesn't have options. You have to kind of put him on your roster, right? So if Eloy turns into the Luke Raley situation where they think they have someone, they will maybe even option Aranda if they think that that's what they need to do to keep Eloy on the roster. You know what I mean? That's what they did with Raley. I forget. I think it was Aranda. Was it Aranda? There was somebody that we were all excited about that was going to have first base. And I was like, no, Raley doesn't have options. They're going to keep Raley. And they kept Raley and optioned the other guy. So
that may have been Jonathan Aranda on the wrong side of that. That seems like it overlaps. Maybe Jason Collette can chime in at some point and be like, no, you guys are wrong. You forgot about this guy that the Rays also messed with playing time wise. But
maybe it was Nate Lowe.
I don't think it goes back quite that far in this case, but they definitely messed with Nate Lowe or messed with me with their usage of Nate Lowe. I recall that very fondly. The other guys on this roster. Okay, so just thinking about the Rays and how they're built and what they're likely to do next. The only Rays without options in the position player group, Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lau, Danny Jansen, Eloy Jimenez, and Ben Rortvedt, the backup catcher. Everybody else can be optioned. Yeah, and if Rortvedt doesn't make the team, then you would just DFA him, expose him to waivers. Like if he's a backup catcher.
And he's better than Driscoll, who they've got that has options.
Right. So I think Rortvedt's just safely the backup catcher. Fine. Okay. No need to spend more time on that. The thing that I think they're going to do, though, we keep looking at their group and saying maybe they have like one more bat than they need just because of their ability to find random players.
They trade Yandy in a second, actually.
Right. I think you trade somebody, especially if you could trade someone without options, so Yandy or Brandon Lau, and get bullpen bolsters that have options. Because I looked at their bullpen. There's only one guy on roster resource in that bullpen right now who actually has options, Mason Montgomery.
They like to have options in the bullpen because they like to kind of keep them fresh and stuff. And they end up having injuries a lot too with Fairbanks in there.
Right. So if I had to guess what the Rays are up to, it's probably finding a way to get a few more guys with options into that bullpen mix. That'd be my best guess as to what's next for them on the transactions front.
If they did that, it would open up rosters. Oh, does Meade have options left? He does. He has one left. It's his last. This is his last chance. But if they wanted to, they could open up first base for like an Aranda Meade combination, right? I think Meade is a righty. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you could have an Aranda Meade situation, and that has more defensive flexibility, which they love. Because as bad as Aranda and Meade are defensively, Meade can play third. Meade can probably play second. That has more defensive versatility than Díaz and Aranda.
Is Yandy Díaz about to become a Brewer?
Who's your first baseman right now? Hoskins.
Oh,
but your DH is sort of open?
Yeah, it's floating right now, but the yellow situation. Okay, Derek doesn't have a Brewers podcast.
Yeah. Yandy could play third.
Yeah, well, I got to investigate that further at a later date. I'll do that on my own time this weekend.
Or I'm not going to
subject
just
everyone to that.
Rebrand this as a Brewers podcast.
I don't think that'd be very popular.
No,
I don't think that'd be good for the listenership of the show. I don't think Jorge Polanco re-upping with the Mariners is going to make Jerry Dipoto any more popular in Seattle right now. It's a 1-year, $7.75 million deal. It's less than the option they had on him. The deal could get to that total because of incentives, so they just shed some guarantees basically by playing it out this way. There's a vesting player option for another year.
It was a really obvious move for them to make, I think. I mean, they had
needed
Dylan
some help
Moore as the starter, and they've never really wanted to depend on Dylan Moore as a starter at a position. I think it also helps Ryan Bliss.
Yes, I think it does. I think there's a couple things happening in Seattle though. So they're going to play Polanco at third. Mm-hmm. So he previously was a shortstop, played second. They're going to move him back to third.
That's a Polanco-Solano situation over there.
Yeah, and I think Solano could platoon at first some with Rayleigh. Like Solano's going to just.
I don't
be
think Locklear makes
guy.
The team. I think Solano's the 1B 3B.
I want Locklear to play and just see what he can do. But I think second base is the big question. You mentioned Ryan Bliss. I think he probably gets the first shot. The weird thing about Ryan Bliss is that Dylan Moore is also a righty, so they can't share the spot. But Dylan Moore is already 32 years old. What are you doing? If you're Seattle, should you trade Dylan Moore? My case for trading Dylan Moore is actually that for his career, he has a 26.8% K rate on the road, 32.9% in Seattle. We've talked about the difficulties of the park so much on this show. Dylan Moore for his career is 17% better than league average when he's anywhere but T-Mobile. So he's a little old. He does a lot of his damage against lefties, sort of holds his own against righties by WRC+. He's a
projected
good fantasy
to be a league
player.
average player. So theoretically, anybody who's below average at second base and a contender could be into it.
Yeah, and he's cheap because he signed a 3-year deal a couple years back that will end this year. So he's clearly priced like a bench guy.
The Giants prize, the ability to play all over the diamond. Pairing Fitzgerald and Moore might make sense. The Guardians, the Brewers. Yeah, the Brewers have an opening on the infield.
So they want to move Terang. You bring him up at least as much as I do, maybe more.
The Royals are currently starting Massey in India, and I think India could play in the outfield. There's something there. So
I think there are actually there are other teams that could see Dylan Moore being a useful bench plus guy, and maybe the results would just be better getting him out of Seattle because those are multi-year splits.
He's the backup plan in Seattle. Like he's the human backup plan. He can play everywhere. If Polanco's hurt, he plays third. If Bliss doesn't work out and Cole Young doesn't work out, he plays second. So I think they want that. They want that high floor roster spackle guy. He's their Chris Taylor. And he's just going to be there. He might even sign an extension with them.
Another 3-year extension. It's a 3-year, $9 million extension.
Take that, Seattle fans.
I want Seattle fans to be happy, to be completely clear.
He did sign a 3-year, $9 million.
Right, he's going to sign another one.
He's been way better than that. I mean, he's been worth that extension. I mean, almost 5 wins over the 3 years.
Yeah, I just think he is another example of a player who has really struggled to hit in that ballpark and isn't nearly as bad when you have him hitting anywhere else. You kind of threw Cole Young to that conversation casually. I think Cole Young finishes the year as the second baseman for the Mariners.
Yeah, I don't love Bliss. I could see it like him giving Bliss a chance, more playing over him, and at some point they make the Young Bliss selection, differently because Cole Young bats lefty, and that's a better platoon with Moore, and he has, I think, between Bliss and Moore, the best, highest value skill is Young's on base ability.
Right, and that would help in this lineup a lot. I started to look at Cole Young yesterday and think he is not Jackson Merrill as a prospect, but he's a very good prospect in his own right, and he's already played 124 games at Double-A. You could tell yourself a story that the Mariners are keeping second base kind of wide open to see what Young does this spring. And if Young's good, maybe they just skip Triple-A for him, or at least make him a first half call up. So I think the more I've looked at how they've played this offseason, the more I've kind of trickled into this belief that Cole Young's going to see significant time in Seattle before season's end. Circling back on Polanco real quick. I mean, he had patellar tendon surgery on his knee at the end of the season. Apparently the Astros were also considering him as an option.
They were negotiating with Alex Bregman.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Defensively, I don't know how well this is really going to go for Polanco, but can he bounce back with the bat? Because I was on the side that thought he was an okay fit when they acquired him. I thought, yeah, sure. Like Jorge Polanco, when he's healthy, shows 25 to 30 home run power. It's just been a lot of injuries that have slowed him down over the course of his career. And even, his last season with the Twins in 2023, only played 80 games, but he popped 14 homers. He had 3 consecutive seasons with a double-digit barrel rate. Like he's added a little swing and miss over time to get to that power, but that trade-off seems like it's worth it. And being a guy that can switch hit, maybe he's not as impacted by T-Mobile, taking a lot of those plate appearances from the left side. So
yeah, he can be a lefty instead of righty. Righty's worse, I think.
I'm just a little bit optimistic about a bounce back for Polanco. Maybe the slash line looks a lot like it did in 2022. He hit 235 with a 346 OBP and a 405 slug, but that's a good bounce back from what he just did last year, and he still could pop 20 or so homers while doing that.
And as it comes up in regards to that strikeout rate in Seattle, he had a 25.7% strikeout rate in the second half. So there's some chance that, he was starting to figure it out. Some guys, I think, get to Seattle and strike out a lot, but, there are people who make contact in Seattle, so there could be a return. And 25.6 is an exact match to Jorge Polanco's 2023 strikeout rate, So I think, give him another shot at the park. And worst case scenario, what he did, I mean, the use case for him, like what he did last year was still useful in some leagues, 213 with 16 homers and 4 stolen bases. In the second half last year, he was useful in deep leagues. What we're talking about here is probably like a third draft and hold second baseman that can also give you third base eligibility. We're talking about a mono league guy that might cost you $7 to $8 and return you 15 or something. I don't think we're talking about a 10 and 12 team guy here.
Correct. Yes, I'm with you.
It doesn't make it that high. Yeah.
Deeper leagues for sure. And in the scenario in which the Mariners do trade Dylan Moore, I think Ryan Bliss can be the competent platoon partner for Cole Young and be the backup shortstop too. I think Bliss is a good enough defender at short where he could be the backup to JP Crawford. So maybe not a great fantasy player, but mono leagues, last guy, reserve, dollar guy. I think
Padres and Mariners make a lot of trades, and the Padres have no money. So getting a $3 million roster spackle like Moore might be into that. Play him in the outfield some.
I am into this. I never thought
I kind of like this one. Padres, because the Padres have no money, right? So could they get $3 million for a high floor, backup player that could even help Xander at short maybe at times,
Yes.
Although he's getting older,
More weekend fun for me, figuring out how to make this Padres-Mariners deal happen. Let's move through the rest of these moves a little bit quickly. Let's go Nationals. Shinnosuke,
89 miles an hour.
Ogasawara. You got ahead of the name.
Learned a sweeper at drive line.
Good job.
Yeah. 18% strikeout rate in Japan.
I mean, would you ever really want to roster someone who had a sub 20% K rate in Japan?
Not really. I mean, one of the few guys who had a sub 20% K rate in America last year was Patrick Corbin. So I think that should make your innards, shrivel a little. I would just say, I mean, it's unknown. So like maybe final pick in a 12. I mean, I don't even think I would.
No, I think this is NL only.
Like reserves.
Yes, reserves.
Where you're like, maybe I can bring him in for some good starts. Maybe
2-start week,
yeah.
Pitching against the doormat, cold weather starts, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I'm not excited about it. How about this one? The Reds acquire Taylor Rogers.
I'm actually a little bit more excited about the other thing the Reds did.
Austin Hayes?
Yeah, I know it's $5 million, but he's suddenly atop of the left field situation according to Fangraphs. I don't know if it's right, though, because right now they say Austin Hayes in left field, 54%, Steer 31%, Lux 7%. At first base, Steer 48%, Encarnacion Strand 25%, Candelario 21%, Candelario 40% at third. Like, this is a really messy. We're going to have to spend some time on building a bench and looking through this. But I do think the most opportunity on this team is in the outfield. It's the infield that's pretty crowded. And maybe somebody surprisingly gets optioned. Maybe Noel Marte or Christian Encarnacion Strand gets optioned because it's a little bit crazy on this infield depth chart. But the outfield, Hayes is comfortably one of the top 4 outfielders. He's better than Stuart Fairchild.
Yeah, right. I think he's a platoon partner for Jake Fraley and a capable backup around the outfield. So what is that?
You think he's more of a 300 because there's right now, if you look at his page, there's some betting system, some of the projection systems are more 300 and some are more 400. I mean, the depth charts say 500 almost.
Closer to like 350 for right now, and then maybe another roster move or something shakes it up where I can nudge that up a little higher. But yeah, I think I'm playing it a little safe with that playing time projection for Hayes. I think he's a good 4th outfielder and platoon partner for Fraley as it currently stands.
The Reds say they've been busy and they can point to, changes they've made and trades they've made, but they've been all like very low money value. And what do I think they're going to do with Taylor Rogers is like mostly play him against lefties, pitch him against lefties, because he's not really that good against righties anymore. And he's not a closer. He's not going to, push Alexis Díaz in the closer role. So, that's been kind of the moves they make. Austin Hayes for $1 and $5 million. What was another move they made?
They were reportedly trying to work out a deal for Luis Robert.
That one I can get behind, but and I guess we should give them credit. Nick Martinez did cost them $20 million. I don't think they should have spent that $20 million on Nick Martinez, but they did do that, and they traded for Gavin Lux. So I can't say these are bad moves, but they're all a little small. Is that mean to say?
No, I think that's the world Bob Castellini chooses to operate in.
That's right.
Tommy Kahnle to the Tigers, just bullpen depth, right? Probably doesn't change anything as far as saves, just a guy. Ryan Stanek back with the Mets, good depth. The Reds also added Wade Miley. That was the other thing that they did. Minor league deal. Wade Miley is just like rotation glue and great clubhouse guy, second pitching coach. Like he's kind of got all of those hats that he can wear.
He's not that far. He's probably their 7 right now. And if Lodolo's hurt, which is when Lodolo's hurt, and then if Lauder is struggling, Miley could be in there.
Mm-hmm. Adbert Alzolay also goes to the Mets, 2-year deal. He's going to miss 2025. So it's just
why didn't the Cubs do that?
I don't know. I can't speak for them.
I wonder if there's something they just felt like maybe there had been some bad blood between them because they kind of yo-yoed him between the rotation and the bullpen or something. But it's not that far from what they would have paid him. They should have just kept him. This is a team that's had a hard time building a bullpen. I don't really get that one. I like it for the Mets.
We got a couple moves from the Orioles. Jorge Mateo back on a 1-year deal to provide some depth, just a clear backup, I think, at this point. Nice bench guy.
Dylan Carlson move by the Orioles plus this one. Dylan Carlson got a major league deal. and Jorge Mateo got a major league deal. I think their bench is set. It is Urias, Mateo, Carlson, and Sanchez. And that means no Kjerstad. I'm just saying.
Autumn new cuts were due tonight, by the way. So I already preemptively jumped in there. Okay. So yeah, looking at roster resource right now, they don't have Carlson. They don't have Carlson on here yet. Once you factor in Carlson,
wait, they do. The Fangraphs depth charts do, but they don't agree with me. But Carlson got a major league deal, right? He has options.
Of course, he has options. He's 26, isn't he?
Did they just sign him to option him? That's possible, I guess. It's a $975,000 deal. Maybe I read that wrong. I figured he was out of options because of the way he's being traded around, you know?
No, it's surprising that he has 3, but
yeah, I guess so. Kjerstad could make the team, and Carlson could be AAA depth.
Get up and stay up. That's how you avoid losing your options. That was the way for Dylan Carlson. I was surprised he ended up there because I just didn't really see a path. But at that price point, you're like, well, hey, maybe we can unlock a few things that other organizations haven't. Cost is almost nothing. Backup center fielder,
hitting coach, you know.
Yeah, like so that's probably where the season begins for Carlson, unless there's a couple injuries in spring training. Elias Díaz ends up in San Diego, so their catching situation is coming into focus, which
he could start, I guess. I mean, I think they'd rather Campusano takes it, but I think there's negativity in San Diego, at least among the fan base, about Campusano. So Elias Díaz could be like a sneaky good catcher too in deep formats.
Yeah, I think at this point I'm just ignoring both of them, even in 2 catcher leagues, and looking elsewhere for catching help.
What about a handcuff? Would you want both of them?
I don't think so. I think they both have to be cheaper for me to do it.
Oh, they're both cheap.
Nah, they got to be
cheaper than they are. They are. Okay.
First 2 Baltic, Mediterranean, and Baltic. It's like the first 2 properties in Monopoly, like cheapest properties, like cheapest
Nobody really
possible catching
wants
tandem.
To buy it.
Yeah, I think that's the only way. Like that rock bottom prices, then I'll say okay, maybe one will be good enough.
You'd rather have a Maya and Kelly?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah,
I would, because I think Amaya is the best of the 4.
Yeah.
That's my read on that. And I don't know what they're doing with Moises Ballesteros at this point.
I don't think you move catching prospects fast. I'd say this a lot, but I don't think that they're like, oh, we need to get him up here. It's more like when Kelly's gone, we bring him up. I think it's slow walk. I was interested by this note by Dan Hayes that Louis Varland is into relief. He has a reliever's arsenal in that we've always said that he's kind of a tight arsenal. It's really just a fastball slider. And he was like 95-ish with the fastball as a starter. So if he can get up to 97, he could look like a traditional fastball slider closer, you know? And Duran's been hurt. That one's Duran, or is that also Duran? We looked this one up even. I'm going to go with Duran, I guess. Duran's been hurt a fair amount, and Jax is like a sinker sweeper guy at his heart. So it's not impossible Louis Varland gets like 5 saves this year. The other part of that is that Woods Richardson has become the primary depth. And I believe that Woods Richardson was helped a little bit by the revamp. Oh, yeah. His stuff plus went from 87 to 92. But 92 is actually workable if you have a larger arsenal and you have command, which to some extent describes Woods Richardson. So I guess just replace Louis Varland with Simeon Woods Richardson in your heads as like possible Twins pitcher that could pitch some this year. It might be okay.
I can't figure out why people don't like Joan Duran more. Joan Duran.
He's been my closer in all of my draft and holds so far.
Well, you like him plenty.
Yeah.
Does he? I mean, he slides sometimes, right? Like
he just slides. He's been the cheapest. What I think is still elite closer. Yeah, he's the closer when he's in. He has elite stuff.
Well, more on
starts
Duran.
To go to like Iglesias and guys I don't want as much after that.
Yeah, I share that assessment. I think he's like the last of the clear closer ones right now based on how the board is coming together. And the good news is we're going to break that down in detail early next week with our 2025 reliever preview. We're also going to open the mailbag next week, so you can drop us some more questions. Send those.
The Mariners
our way.
had a trifecta of weird ones. I just want to throw out there real quick.
They
signed Luis Castillo. No, not that one. They signed Julio Rodriguez. No, not that one. And they signed Neftali Feliz. Yes, that one, to minor league deals. And somehow that makes sense to me all in a row like that.
What has Neftali Feliz been doing lately?
No idea. But on what I think is funny is that this is going to be annoying as heck when it comes to VLOOKUP in Excel.
If the other Julio Rodriguez and Luis Castillo
make the
get
majors
high enough up to end up in the spreadsheets, you might be a few years away from having to actually worry about that. And by then, Luis Castillo, the current pitcher, may no longer be a member of the Mariners. Yeah, like, okay, so another weekend project. What has Neftali Feliz been up to? We haven't seen him in the big league since 2021.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Mexican league.
Very
few pitchers come back from Mexico.
That league has been a one-way ticket toward retirement. Yes.
Robinson Cano is not coming back.
No. No. He's not in good numbers, though. So, all right. Maybe the stuff is
not a good league.
Right. That's more likely. That's the reason. But maybe they saw something there. But yeah, so thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for pulling that together. The Mexican League, that's where Neftali Feliz has been. I just feel like I haven't read any reports, rumors, skeets, tweets, anything suggesting he was on the radar.
There has been like a little bit of a percolation of guys. I mean, Gerard Encarnacion recently came out, And of course, the biggest one recently is Julio Urias.
Right, but I have forgotten about Neftali Feliz, so he's back.
Exactly. That's why I thought I would just remind you he exists and he has a minor league deal.
All right. Join our Discord. In the Discord, you can send mailbag questions. Just use the mailbag channel. We'll get a few questions in at some point next week. Always appreciate those. You can find Eno on Blue Sky, enoceris.bsky.social. I am dvr.bsky.social. Thanks to Brian Smith for producing this episode. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.